Good afternoon. I'm Warren Brown. I'm the Vice President for Instruction and Student Services here at Seattle Central Community College. On behalf of Seattle Central Community College and President Kilpatrick, we'd like to welcome you here today. And we're quite delighted to be hosting this event as we discuss the transit service in the greater Seattle area. Having efficient, reliable transit service is vital to our community. Seattle Central, as an open-door access institution of higher education, particularly depends upon transit service to fulfill our mission. And our mission is to provide affordable, accessible education to the students and community members of the greater Seattle area. Hence, if students do not get to our campus, they can't take our classes, and they can't get a college education that's vital to their future, the future of their families, the future of the community, and also for regional economic viability. In a moment, the Transit Riders Union will make a presentation about the issue and the proposed cuts to the King County Metro Transit Service. Then there will be a panel discussion moderated by Dominic Holden, who's the editor of The Stranger magazine, and that'll be followed by a question and answer session. You'll hear a lot of great ideas of how we can move forward, so please do your part by contacting your local political representative and letting them know how reliable transit is important to the lives of our community.
Thank you all for inviting me here today. These proposed bus cuts will have a devastating effect on the residents of King County. Transit is critical to the mobility of King County and the Puget Sound region. Metro carries about 400,000 passengers a day, almost 120 million every year, mostly during the peak hours when our roads are at their most congested. So how did we get into this situation where we need to propose 17% cuts to this vital system? Going back in history, in 2000, the state passed Tim Eyman's Initiative 695, feel free to hiss. That limited car tabs to $30. Although it was later declared unconstitutional, the state legislature at the time decided to implement it anyway. The loss of a progressive, fair motor vehicle excise tax in the state meant the virtual elimination of state support for transit agencies. Most states support transit at about 20%, and our state used to. Now in Washington, that's less than 2%. So Metro and other transit agencies in the state became almost entirely reliant on two funding sources to pay for service: the sales tax and fare box revenue that riders pay. In 2008, when the Great Recession hit, Metro lost about 25% of that sales tax revenue as the economy collapsed. About 60% of our budget is sales tax, about 30%, 29% actually, is fare box revenue. That meant a loss of $1.3 billion since 2008 in expected transit revenue to fund Metro service. Since then, we've done everything we can to keep service on the street. We cut hundreds of staff positions, tightened schedules for our bus drivers, deferred needed bus purchases, drained our reserves, and our drivers helped by going without a pay raise and that they needed to live in this very expensive place. We've also had a very complete year-long audit led by the King County Council to find every efficiency we could. And we also had to raise fares 4 times in 4 years, almost doubling them from what they were. Because we had demonstrated a commitment to reform, the state legislature gave us a 2-year temporary congestion reduction charge, or CRC, which is the $20 charge you see today on your car tabs. That charge was supposed to be a bridge until an expected statewide transportation package, including local options for us to fund transit in the Puget Sound region, materialized. All the actions we took made up about $800 million of that $1.3 billion. But now the CRC expires in June. The state has failed to keep its commitment to provide mitigation service for the Alaskan Way Viaduct service during construction. And we have no reserves left to use. And we still don't have a statewide transportation package, despite our efforts. So we've been forced to propose cuts of up to 17% of the Metro system. Now, I know you're probably asking yourselves, isn't the economy better? Why is Metro still unable to fund service? Well, the economy is better, but the fastest an economy can really grow is at max about 6% a year in sales tax revenues. Since we lost so much, we have to recover from a lower base. So if we were at 100 and dropped to 75, if we grow by 6% a year, it's going to take us almost a decade to get back to where we were in 2008. We're now at funding levels that we had in 1997. So even as in the meantime, those costs will continue to increase to run a bus system, and the number of riders will continue to grow as people move here, our roads become more congested, and people become more dependent on transit. So now we face a $75 million annual gap in funding to keep the service we now have on the street, and that's why we've been forced to announce these cuts to our bus system. Our neighboring transit systems have already seen devastating cuts already. Community Transit in Snohomish County eliminated all Sunday service and made other cuts to their service. Pierce Transit to the south shrank its service area and cut service by 30%, abandoning transit service to most of Pierce County. We were not willing to do either one of those options. There's no good way to cut transit systems. Increasingly, people work 7 days a week, and to abandon weekend service hurts a lot of working people. We also weren't willing to abandon whole parts of King County for service. They pay the same taxes, have the same needs as the rest of us do. So we used our new transit strategic plan to make cuts in a way that tries to preserve as much service as possible. Our strategic plan dictates where service should go based on ridership and measurable data. Service is prioritized to corridors where there's more people living there and where there are more jobs where people need to get to. And then we balance that with two other things. One is social equity concerns. We know that many areas of the county are even more transit dependent because of lower incomes and other indicators of poverty. And we also still have a responsibility to provide some geographic value to people throughout King County who pay taxes to support the transit system and have needs as well. So we proposed these cuts last fall to ensure a long public process and to urge the state legislature one more time to do their job, pass a transportation package with local funding options for transit. Under this proposal, 74 routes will be deleted. Those are the routes, for the most part, with the lowest ridership. 107 routes will see some changes in service. Wherever possible, we tried to maximize the amount of people we're still able to serve by making cuts in late night service and making cuts in midday service. Only about 33 routes will see no changes at all, but they will likely be much more crowded. The effect of a lot of these cuts are going to mean less access to transit for most people, longer walks, more painful transfers, a more difficult system. If the economy continues to improve, we may be able to reduce some of those cuts, and we're going to take a look at the financial figures when we get them in March to see whether we can reduce some of those cuts, but they will still be significant cuts. We've been going down to the state legislature for the last 5 years urging action, and the state legislature has failed to act. First, they told us we needed to show reform. We did. Then they told us we didn't speak with a unified voice here in King County on transportation needs. So we built a coalition of most of the cities in King County, businesses, labor, students, human service advocates, riders, and others. But they still fail to act every year. We've started to feel like Bill Murray in the movie Groundhog Day, where the same thing happens over and over. These cuts are unacceptable to us, so we've proposed a package to go it alone in King County and save Metro from those cuts. On Tuesday, Executive Constantine and a majority of the King County Council proposed to save Metro cuts by using existing funding tools to raise that the state legislature has already given us. We have the ability under state law to form a transportation benefit district in King County, but it limits the amount of the kind of taxes you can use. The only tools that it gave us that we were able to fill this gap were to increase the sales tax and a flat vehicle license fee. So in agreement with the cities throughout King County, we proposed a 1/10 of a penny sales tax and a $60 license fee on every car in King County. That would raise about $130 million a year. About 60% of that under the agreement would go to Metro to keep that service on the street. And 40% would go to cities in the county by population to spend on fixing our aging city streets, county roads, and also provide whatever they want to do with that money. It could be non-motorized bike facilities as well here in Seattle. We also proposed another 25% fare increase that had already been assumed in our financial plan and was figured into that deficit I was talking about. These proposed taxes and the fare increase are not as progressive as we would like. So we're also proposing at the same time a new low-income fare of $1.50 for people below 200% of the federal poverty level. We would love to have more progressive ways to keep transit on the street, but we can only use the tools the state legislature allows us to have. So let me repeat that. We can only use the taxes that the state legislature allows us. We have no more time, we have no more reserve or magic rabbits to pull out of our hat to keep service on the street. So we're proposing to go on the ballot on April 22nd to save Metro from these cuts and direct money to cities to fix our failing roads and bridges. We're moving in the wrong direction. Our own strategic plan shows that we have 500,000 service hours of underserved corridors where buses are overcrowded. I ride the bus every day. I rode it to get here today. And, you know, we have increasing numbers of buses in this county that are forced to pass people by because they're simply too full. Many of us stand every day on the bus to get where we need to go. We need to increase our service by a minimum of 15%, not be talking about cutting it by the same amount. We have to save Metro from these cuts. And the young who can't afford a car and the elderly who in many cases can't drive any longer are among those most affected, as are those with lower incomes or no income that simply can't afford an automobile. You know, this is going to become an increasing problem as we move forward. Our society is aging. All the baby boomers like me are now going to be becoming seniors over the next 10, 15 years, and we're going to become even more transit reliant. We're not building any more roads in this region. We have trouble keeping the roads that we have in good shape. We need to be expanding transit and funding transit. And that's why I'm here today. I'd be happy to hear your thoughts and looking forward to being part of the panel. Thanks.
Hello again. Could I get the screen going? Okay, so I'm going to go back before Tim Eyman, back before 1999, way back to the 1870s, to address the question of why can we only do what the state says. This stern fellow was Judge John Forrest Dillon. He was fascinated by the relation between cities and counties and states. So much so that he wrote a 5-volume book called Municipal Corporations. It's probably 2,000 pages total of the relationship between counties and states. And it was his opinion that cities and counties are essentially creatures or children of the state. And as such, they can only sort of do the things that have been expressly granted to them by the state. In fact, in his own words, he said, "Municipal corporations owe their origin to and derive their powers and rights wholly from the legislature. It breathes into them the breath of life, without which they cannot exist." Very grim. "As it creates, so may it destroy. If it may destroy, it may abridge and control." So, that sounds horrible. But as always, the devil is in the details. In 1891, there was a case that went to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that, yes, this is sort of the de facto law of the land in the United States. But, so like I said, the devil is in the details, and there are some states that confer fairly broad powers to cities and counties. Washington is not one of those. It's a very strict Dillon's rule state, especially fiscally. If you want to raise taxes, you have to ask for permission. You have to ask for your allowance from the state over and over and over and over again. And since Washington was founded, there's probably been 6 or 7 attempts to get a progressive income tax in place. They've all failed, either due to judges, legislators, voters, for kind of dubious reasons. So what that leaves us for things like, actually for everything in the state, is either property taxes, sales taxes, B&O taxes, all regressive in one way or another. So when Metro goes to the state and said, we need help, there's nothing they can do. And as Chris said, we used to have a motor vehicle excise tax of 2.2%. That's 2.2% on the value of your vehicle up until 1999 when Tim Eyman ran I-695 and replaced it with the flat $30 rate. And Metro lost about a third of its operating budget at that point. And since then, we've been, just careening from crisis to crisis with sales tax. So Washington is actually the most regressive state in the nation tax-wise. I don't know if you can see that, but the poorest 20% pays 17%, almost 17% of their total income in taxes. This may be a little easier to read. The richest pay 2.6% of their income in taxes. And it's just sort of, so the people who ride the bus and the most, the highest users of Metro make less than $55,000 a year. They're paying a lot more in taxes than people who don't ride. And that goes up, that increases every time sales tax goes up or fares go up. So this is what Metro needs, and Chris touched on this a little bit. This is also maybe not very clear. But the current system is the gray down there. To stay in the current system, we need increased funding. For the system growth, because Metro actually needs to be growing right now. Service is at an all-time, or ridership's at an all-time high. It's only going to grow more. We're expecting 100,000 sort of new residents, like in the next 30 years. And the top one there is PSRC, that's the Puget Sound Regional Council. They do sort of regional planning. They work with the federal government on funding. That's their estimated needs for the next, until 2040. We're so far short of that, it's ridiculous. And this cannot be made up ever by sales tax and fare increases, especially because Metro's like basically capped out for sales tax increases. They'd have to go back again and again and again and ask for these sort of minute increases in sales tax. So this is not something that can ever be done with the way we're doing it now. It's going to, we're at capacity now, and we cannot kind of begin to go to where we need to go. Chris also mentioned direct state funding, as it says there. On average, it's 20% of a state's transportation budget goes to transit statewide. We're between 2 and 4. A good comparison is actually, so we just went through a special session and 4 special sessions with no transportation budget. Pennsylvania kind of just did the same thing last year. They went through a regular session and 3 special sessions. Finally came up with a budget, 25% of which goes directly to transit systems in the state. Washington is a pretty pathetic outlier when it comes to that kind of thing since 1999. And it's really diametrically opposed to what the public says they actually want. This is a survey that was conducted recently by the Washington State Transportation Commission survey, and they asked voters, what do they want? And 22% new roads, 33% multimodal transit, bike, ped environment, 45% road maintenance. What we've been offered by the majority coalition caucus in the Senate, which is the Republicans plus 2 turncoat Democrats, is a $12 billion package, $9 billion of which goes to new highway funding. It's pretty low priority for the people of Washington. But in that $12 billion highway package, there is this sort of like bone that was thrown to King County voters. It's a 1.5% motor vehicle excise tax to sort of replace what we lost in 1999. And what they're doing, they're basically holding King County hostage. Like, vote for this terrible thing that nobody wants, and you'll get authority to tax yourself. So these are the 4, these are King County's majority coalition caucus senators. Rodney Thomas, one of the guys, he's a Democrat. and he turned, and the other 4 are in Redmond, Auburn, Mercer Island. And they are the ones who have been holding up that 1.5% MVET, which on the whole is maybe not a bad thing because the rest of the package is so bad. But to really affect change for Metro, for transit systems statewide, it has to be done at the state level. And we'll be talking more about what we're doing at the state level, what other groups are doing at the state level. So it has to be on the state level, but before that, riders and transit users have to get organized locally. Riders have shown they're good at saving particular stops or particular routes or service in a particular neighborhood, but that means somebody else loses theirs, and you have to think of the transit system as a whole. And to do that, you need to be organized. And buses can be a little boring sometimes, but we need to think of them while things are going well as in times of crisis.
Hello, everybody. Can I say I love the Earth sign in the back? That rules. My name's Dominic Holden. I'm the news editor at The Stranger, and I grew up in Seattle, and I love Metro, not only because it's very useful, but because I had to love Metro. When I was 9 years old, I asked my mother for a ride, and my mother responded by giving me 65 cents and a bus schedule. And I had to figure it out. Also, I'm old enough, apparently, that it used to cost 65 cents to ride the bus, which is, now it's like, 5 times that amount. I've been riding Metro all the time. I ride my bike, I ride Metro. I've never driven a car in my life. That's my admission. Because I support the war on cars. Partly because Metro's been a fantastic service in Seattle. And I thank Metro, and I thank King County. And I also thank Seattle Central for having this forum, because it's really important that people in Seattle organize around defending a bus system that's really crucial for us. I want to sort of zoom out for just a second before I bring the panel up here. And that is to say that, I love cities. And you guys love cities. That's why you live here. But the question is, what is a city? What makes it work? Jane Jacobs, in her book, that's sort of the seminal guide to contemporary urban planning, she talks about cities and regions that function as being a place where you can live in one area, work in another area, go to school somewhere else, and go have fun somewhere else. Essentially, you can live your life, you can earn your money, you can become educated, you can spend your money anywhere in that region. And right now in Seattle, we're doing all right. But I live in the Central District, and if I want to go spend my money in Ballard, especially at rush hour, it's just not going to happen. Our streets are getting more and more crowded. Metro service, trying to slog through all of that, faces a real challenge. And we're, as Bo just mentioned from the Transit Riders Union, we're expecting more and more people here. What our region needs if we want to be a functional city is more transit, not less of it. We need light rail in addition to Metro, and we need Metro to be running on time and frequently. And even as it stands right now, I think that Metro is often falling behind. So we need to come up with more money. The question is, how are we going to pay for it? And the truth is that because we are a successful city, because we are an economic engine, there's music. There is a war on Seattle in the legislature. They are trying to screw us every single day. And I don't think that anybody here should mistake what's going on. They don't like the fact that we're prosperous, they don't like the fact that we're liberal, and they're trying to screw us out of our money. And they have a myth that they are perpetuating. The myth says that they're paying for everything in Seattle, and it's flat wrong. The truth is that we are putting in about, for every dollar we put into the state, as a county, we're only getting about 65 cents back. It's not as dramatic for transit, but we're putting more transportation money into the state budget than we're getting back. Yet the lawmakers have essentially ganged up on us to say that if we want to save our transit, if we want to be a prosperous region for students, for young people, for businesses, then we're going to have to come up with our own mechanisms to fund transit. And what they're trying to do, What we should be fighting against is this mechanism by which they are forcing regressive taxes on us. They want us to pay with more sales tax that disproportionately affect the poor. They want us to pay for more car tabs that disproportionately affect the poor. They want to force us to increase the fares, which are affecting transit riders who are disproportionately of lower income. But the truth is that when a city prospers, it benefits everybody, especially the big business owners. So this is not just a matter of getting from one place to another. This is a values struggle of making sure that the workers who make the economic engine of our state tick get their fair shake, and that we're not paying more money than we should be paying so that other people at the top can make a bunch of money and profit from our work. This is an issue that is widely supported in Seattle. That's why we have so many panelists, and I'd ask you guys to start coming up now. But there are some panelists who couldn't make it here today, and one of them is Seattle City Council member Tom Rasmussen. I've written a lot of ill words about Councilmember Tom Rasmussen. I'll be the first to say it, but I've got to give him props. He's on absolutely the right side of this issue, and he's been working really hard. He prepared a statement that, in a politician's style, is so long you can't believe it. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to read 3 paragraphs. It's great. He says, "Thank you for organizing this forum on impending cuts to King County Metro Transit Service. I'm sorry I cannot join you, but I have another commitment scheduled for the time of your forum." He points out that there is a discussion of a transit package, and he says, "Unfortunately, there are legislators from King County who hold leadership positions and who are failing us in spite of our unified and best efforts." They were on the screen a moment ago. Over the last year, we have met with them. Senators Andy Hill, Rodney Tom, the slimy traitor former Democrat who's now leading Republicans in the state Senate, Steve Litzow and Joe Fain. Numerous times and still no results. Now we are nearly out of time and the county must plan for a ballot measure. He says in closing, "While we have not given up on our efforts to persuade those in Olympia to approve the funding package, King County will go to the voters this spring if the legislature fails to act. He's Rastafarian apparently. I anticipate all Seattle elected officials will be working for its success. Should there be a ballot measure to fund Metro, we will need your help in getting it passed by the voters." So one of the things I want to talk about and ask our panelists to talk about is how we get that passed by the voters. And first, that we ask ourselves, is this desperate local Plan B an option that we truly support? Given the authority that we have, is this regressive funding package worthwhile? Is it truly worth fighting for? So I'm going to ask our panel a few questions, and this is how I'd like to structure it, then we're going to go to a Q&A. I would like the folks who didn't speak earlier to talk about how we got ourselves into this situation, what the impacts are, especially on their constituencies, what they see the solutions as being. Maybe it's this funding package that's on the table, or another one, and what we can do to actually make that happen. So, your name, who you work with, how your group's impacted, last time you rode a Metro bus. Go ahead.
My name is Tanner Gomez. I am the student representative on this panel. Lauren was not here today or could not make it. I am also the commuter representative at Seattle University, which is down the street from here. The last time that I rode the bus was yesterday, except that I ride it every day at 6 in the morning and 6 at night. As a student representative, I feel that we will be greatly affected by this, both academically and financially. If the Metro bus is cut more than it already has, in my experience, I used to have to walk across the street to catch a bus. And then it was cut, I had to walk 2 miles to get to the next available bus to come to downtown. And so I had to move cities. And I don't see this as being something that is a good idea for more students.
When was the last time you rode a bus?
Yesterday.
Yeah, did you go to
Hi, everyone. My name is Ty Pethy. I'm the president of Local 304 for the Washington Federation of State Employees. I represent over 1,400 employees across King County. The last time that I rode a Metro bus was this morning. I commute into work here at Seattle Central every single morning and leave by bus every single evening. Over half of the employees I represent also rely on the Metro bus for their main commuting option to get back to work, to serve students every single day, to be at the Department of Licensing to help you renew your car tabs and get a new license, to the state of ecology to keep our streams and waterways clear. All of these services by general government and the state community college employees, 50% of them get there by bus. So it has a huge impact upon us. If we can't get into work, we can't serve you. We can't help out students. We can't provide the role of general government. And most of us can't really actually afford to switch to alternative forms of transportation. I personally know from my position that I could not afford to look at the idea of leasing a car and paying insurance every month and putting gas into it to pay for parking at the school to commute back and forth every single day. And so I truly rely upon all of these methods of transportation, whether it's the light rail, whether it's the Metro bus, or whether it's improvements to the bicycle lanes and walking, sidewalks. So that's why I'm here.
I'm Yasmin. I'm with the Transit Riders Union, and I rode the bus this morning to get here. Our organization has about 100 members that are poor and working class people, and we are an independent, democratic organization that's basically fighting to save and expand bus service for everybody. As several panelists have touched on, if bus service is cut, it's going to disproportionately affect older people and people who are too young to drive and people who are disabled that just don't have the option to drive at all.
Hi, my name is Katie Wilson. I'm General Secretary of the Transit Riders Union. I last rode the bus on the evening of Friday, December 27th, and that was coming back from vacation. I actually ride my bicycle all the time, and I do occasionally ride the bus. I have to ride the bus at least once a month to continue in my role in the Transit Riders Union, I figure. But honestly, the bus is expensive, and I don't make very much money, and biking is almost always faster and more reliable. However, I recognize that I have the privilege of being able to bicycle, and not everyone has that. And as I always realize when I'm out there with the cars, I'm one bicycle accident away from being totally dependent on the bus. Yeah, that's about it.
I already talked a little bit, so I will just tell you my bus story. I rode the bus to get up here from downtown. Today, you can see me every day, as I was this morning, on either the Route 120, one of the busiest of 10 buses in the King County system, which goes through the Delridge neighborhood, which is one of those transit-dependent neighborhoods, or the 21 or the C line. I'm usually standing next to the back door, playing on my smartphone or reading a book. But ride the bus every day, as does my wife, who works downtown, and my 2 teenage children.
Hi, my name is Robin Tarto. I represent the local teachers union, the AFT, and I am the Seattle Central Senate President, so I represent the part-time and full-time faculty at Seattle Central. And of course, I'm very concerned that there are 2 bus routes that are being canceled to Capitol Hill and 4 or 5 that are having reduced service. And that concerns me greatly, not just for myself, because I ride the bus every day, but also there's been tuition increases for our students, and there have been no pay raises for part-time and full-time faculty in a very long time. Speaking about our state legislature, they haven't implemented COLAs in a very long time. But regardless of that, when people can't get here, they can't take our programs, they can't effectively teach our students. Staff members have a hard time getting here if bus service is reduced. I'm very, very concerned about how there's going to be a decrease in Metro, and I've done a fair amount of research, and it seems as though it's all hinging on in 2016 when hopefully light rail makes its way up here to Capitol Hill. But of course, at the same time, they're also As you've noticed by all the cranes that are up here on Capitol Hill, all these people that are going to be moving up here, and most of the buildings have come in with little or no parking. It seems as though the government has seen that a 0.7 maximum of parking per resident seems to be okay for parking here, which means since there'll be no parking, more people will be riding transit, and there won't be any transit for them to ride.
My name's still Bo Morton. I'm the assistant secretary with the Transit Riders Union. I last took a bus last night to and from a bar, and public transportation made that responsible decision possible.
So we're going to look in the rearview mirror and figure out how we got here, because I think it was Chris who described this as being like Groundhog Day, where we're constantly groveling in front of Olympia and asking for them to give us permission to tax ourselves, which is pretty bananas. But I don't know if maybe Ty or Robin want to answer this question. Why you think we got, or how we got into this situation? And just give us some historical perspective from where you're coming from.
I think that from my point of view, we've seen a really critical eye turned towards public and governmental services in the last 2 decades. I think we've seen increasing criticism for where the tax dollars go, how they're used, and how much tax revenue we should be collecting from our citizens. At the same time as we've been decreasing the amount of taxes we collect through lowering such things as the car tax and the car tabs, or providing a cap on certain property taxes or sales tax, or requiring tax increases to go to the public to be voted on before they can be implemented. We've also seen a lot of push for money to be given away to private corporations in order to sort of spur business interests and hopefully create new jobs. And I think that we're reaching the point after a decade of doing this where we're not seeing an increase in jobs or an increase of our economy by spurring on this new growth, by giving away these tax dollars. Instead, we've just been seeing the dollars going to public services that we all used to rely on disappearing. And we've seen a huge amount of tuition increases for all of our students across Washington state in that last decade. I think back to when I was a student in 2001, and I was paying about $500 for community college classes at Shoreline Community College. I look at some of the students now paying over $1,000 for the same amount of credit hours, and that is just wrong. And it's not because the actual costs of the college have gone up that much. It's because the amount of funding put forward by the state has gone down year after year. And I think that to compound this problem, we've also gone through 2 small economic downturns, one major and one that was minor. We had a downturn in the market in 2001 that spurred on a lot of these concerns over taxation. And then we can all remember and think back just a couple years ago to 2008 and how devastating that was. And we're still recovering from that. I think the option right now that I see going forward is really discussing as citizens these ideas of taxation issues and whether we should be giving tax breaks to big business and also what ways we should actually provide income for the state to provide these services.
Robin, do you want to add anything?
Well,
You're a public employee.
yes, I am.
And enemy of everybody, right? Because teachers are the enemy lately. Bus drivers are the enemy. They all want to cut the fat from government. And so the result has been, a lot of cuts to education and transit alike.
Absolutely. I think what a lot of people miss is that while we're oftentimes the target, we're often also the ones that are suffering. There's been a lot of cutbacks to our part-time faculty. I am a part-time faculty, and they've done away with several of our programs that were well-known actually throughout the country that students used to come here for have been eliminated because they were seen as too cost-effective or not cost-effective. And those programs have gone to the wayside, and I think that not only have faculty suffered, but we're supposed to be focusing on our students and putting out people who can be productive in the community and able to get jobs. And that just can't happen if we're cutting services, which then we're cutting programs, which means we're cutting educators. And because programs get reduced, that means that there's less educators on campus and people who need jobs and have to often, like you all, seek employment elsewhere. It's unfortunate that people often see us as enemies because you see your tax dollars going to education, but do you want to have educated citizens, or do you want to have people that are just sitting at home collecting welfare and not getting educated? In addition, a couple of things I'd like to add in talking about the sales tax. One of the other things I noticed in doing some research is that most of the buildings that are going up here have a 12-year reprieve from paying any taxes. So there's a good amount of tax dollars that could be going towards Metro that are going to be never seen. So.
Tax the developers!
We've been joined by a new panelist. Do you want to introduce yourself, explain a little bit about how you're impacted by these potential cuts, and then say the last time you rode a Metro bus?
Hi, my name's Alex Brennan. I'm with Capitol Hill Housing. I'm sorry I'm late. We house about 1,700 low-income residents, about half of which are located on Capitol Hill, and our residents rely a lot on Metro Transit service to get to work, to get to see family, to get to goods and services, and we also do a lot of work on Capitol Hill with the rest of the neighborhood, and see transit as being really important for Capitol Hill residents overall, as I'm sure most of you know. I brought a couple data points with me. I don't know if any of these things have been talked about already, but one of the reasons why we focus a lot of our affordable housing development on Capitol Hill is because not only does it save on housing costs, but it saves on transportation costs. And transportation costs in the region in general are about 21% of household income, and on Capitol Hill that ranges from about 9 to 13%. So if you think about a savings of about 10% of your annual income, that can be the benefit of living on Capitol Hill if you have really good transit service. But with the cuts that we're seeing, that could really change, and a lot of people could have to buy a car for the first time, have to start spending a lot more money on their transportation costs. And currently 38% of residents on Capitol Hill don't own a car. So it's a major savings that Metro in part is able to provide. And so that's sort of the perspective that I'm coming from primarily today. And the last time I rode a bus was on my way to work this morning. I took the 36.
Thank you very much. Our next question is, and I know we've touched on this a little bit, but we've got 3 people from the Transit Riders Union here. I'd like you to touch briefly on what you think the impacts are. And we've heard the stats. It's like 74 routes would be eliminated, like 100 or something would be reduced. But I mean, that's a little bit abstract. What's it mean for people who ride transit? So we can hear from the Transit Union, and then Tanari, I'd like you to add. Sorry? Tannery. I'm sorry. Tannery. So Transit Riders Union, do you want to explain how you think this will affect people?
Yeah, sure. I mean, really we're talking about pretty massive cuts. And as Chris began by saying, the effect is going to be devastating if they actually have to go through with 17% cuts. So, I mean, talking about eliminating, 74 or however many routes, I mean, what that means is that in some cases, whole neighborhoods or areas are just going to totally lose their service. So, for instance, we have, actually I think Diane is here, but we have people in the Transit Riders Union who live on the 27 route, like in Leshai. And and the 27 is on the list of routes to be eliminated. If that takes place, people who live in Leshai have no bus. And there's a fairly substantial steep uphill walk to the next bus route. And lots of seniors live in Leschi. And I mean, so that's basically just going to make it, I mean, those people, if they don't have friends or family to drive them somewhere, you know, they're going to have to start riding access, or if they don't qualify for that, how are they going to get around? So I think there's examples like that, you know, all over the city where there's pockets where people are just basically going to be unable to access public transit. And then, of course, you know, just having a lower frequency and reductions on so many routes means that just, you know, riding transit is just going to become, like, anyone who has another option, including a car, is going to start using that other option because it's just going to become more and more frustrating to try to get anywhere on the bus. And so that's going to make congestion worse. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you could go on and on about the bad effects, but basically, it sucks. So anything you want to add or anything?
Oh, that's good. One other thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but all night owl routes would be eliminated? Most of them?
I believe
A
most.
good number, yeah.
Maybe not all.
So, you know, the night owl routes are the ones that run really late. People who work in restaurants, bars, who don't work regular 9-to-5 jobs, who want to take part in the nighttime activities that cities allow, that's done. You either don't do that or you get a car. So that's going to really sort of just like chop off large portions of the city and a huge chunk of activities in the city that we offer. Those will be done.
And so people will just lose their jobs, basically, right? So.
Yeah.
So as student representative, I have experienced many of these issues where I had to move cities because they cut the metro, and that was the first cut. And if they were to cut even more routes and reduce the hours that they are working, then our students, which our commuting students make up more than half of our population at Seattle University, will be affected by this. We have students that commute from Mukilteo, that commute from Tacoma. It's not just in the Seattle area. They use these buses to connect to other routes in other places. And so if they were to reduce or eliminate most of these buses, most of these routes, it could potentially and economically affect the nation as a whole, because, you know, Seattle University and Seattle Central is our future. This is where our students and our leaders are coming from. And if they're affected at this young age, then how are they supposed to get their resources to be a better person, to be able to make a difference in our nation?
And I just want to support Tanri's arguments and feelings there for a moment. 11% of the frequent regular riders of King County Metro are students. These are the people that I come to work every day to serve and help out over in my office in our student leadership division here. Another 55% of those regular riders are full-time employees like myself, going to work jobs within King County. So cutting, Metro would affect a large amount of students and also a large amount of people that go day to day to their work and rely on it. Personally, I know that with the proposed changes, I would lose the bus route that I rely on to get to work every single morning. It would actually become more effective for me to walk to work from Beacon Hill than it would be to try to transfer on the light rail to get up here every single day. So, I mean, there's a huge personal impact, even on just small distances within our city like that. And you're affecting a giant swath of our society, our fellow citizens, and the people that we know. 33% of households have a frequent and regular rider of Metro in that household. That's 1/3 of houses that will be affected by this. So, I mean, I think that these are really actually quite devastating changes and cuts that are being proposed. And I think that makes us all sad. It makes us wonder, what the hell can we do? I think what we really need to do is speak out together as citizens to the state, saying that they need to get rid of loopholes, get rid of tax breaks for certain organizations, look at where they can financially squeeze money out without affecting services, and also propose new streams of revenue. I think a lot of our legislators are really worried that if they mention taxes, they're going to lose their next election. But I think we really need to come to them as the citizenry and say, we're not against taxes, we just want fair taxes that support us and support the services we rely on.
So for the rest of the, thank you very much, all of you guys. For the next part, I want to talk about what the solution is. Like, we understand, okay, potentially we're getting screwed here, but what are we going to do about it? And there's two different proposals on the table. I know Chris outlined them before, but I just want to sort of refresh everyone's memory. What a lot of people are asking for is for the state, as part of their transportation package this session, to allow us to impose a motor vehicle excise tax, which is a tax on the total value of the vehicle. This is considered more progressive because people who own a more expensive car end up paying more. They can afford a more expensive car, they can afford more taxes to pay into the system, and then people who own a less expensive car would end up paying less. It doesn't look like the legislature is going to do that. It looks like we may have to use what little taxing authority we have. And that includes three parts. This was proposed on, I want to say, Monday, Tuesday, by County Executive Dow Constantine. It includes, first, a car tab fee. So no matter whether you own an SUV Hummer that is encrusted in diamonds, you pay $60. Or if you own a jalopy, you pay $60. And so obviously it is disproportionately affecting people who own less expensive cars and make less money unless you're wealthy and you have a fetish for jalopies. Second, it would impose a 0.1% new sales tax. And as a proportion of their income, low-income earners spend more of their money on taxable goods. And finally, it would raise the fare for Metro, which was expected, by 25 cents a trip. So these are our legislative options. One is considered more fair but unrealistic, and the other one is considered less fair but more doable. So I guess what I'd like to, I'm sure everybody wants to weigh in on this, and maybe we'll start at the other end of the panel, this time with Alex. And I do want to get to a Q&A, but I want to give everybody their piece. So try to sort of cut to the chase of what you think about these options, and then what you think we should do to advance the one that you support.
Okay, well, I think the one piece that I would add to the summary that you just made, Dominic, is that not only is the state option unlikely to pass, but that even though the state option would provide a more progressive taxing option for King County, it would likely come with a pretty big gas tax for the state overall that would be disproportionately devoted to highways. And the gas tax is also pretty regressive. And a lot of that, a lot of those highway impacts would probably also have some negative impacts from my perspective on the state too. So I think that to me, it's not just I guess that makes me a lot less enthusiastic about trying to pursue this unlikely statewide option. I'm definitely really not happy with the regressive nature of the taxes that King County has available to itself right now.
And what do you want to have happen, and how do you want to do it?
So, in terms of what my ideal, the ideal situation would be?
Or realistic one.
Realistic
the question is, what do we do now? We're about to get screwed. What do you think we should do?
So I think that the Plan B proposal that the county has right now, I think is, and from my perspective, is the best option. And given the limited amount of time going forward, I think we just need to get behind that and try and get that passed now, with the idea of, in the longer run, finding replacements for some of those regressive revenue sources. And I'll say one thing that I think has helped a lot with the regressive aspect of the Plan B proposal is the low-income fare that's been added as part of that. So that's my perspective.
I'm actually going to defer to Katie on this for the TRU side. We had something planned out.
Well, I guess I can't defer to Katie, but
We can all defer to Katie.
Don't let me stop you.
okay. I'm generally not in favor of anything that's going to cost me more money. And both of those options, unfortunately, will cost me more money. I would be in favor of, although begrudgingly so, if the second option is going to pass, I think that's at least a good temporary solution, but I think we need to look more towards these big businesses that are dragging all these people in from other cities, other towns, other nations, and stop giving all these tax breaks. And, in addition to that, the rents here up on Capitol Hill have gone from less than $1,000 a month to over $2,000 a month for smaller spaces. And I just think that some of these things are ridiculous, and they're looking in the wrong place for these funding sources. They're looking to the little guy, and it's always the little guy at the bottom that gets screwed and not the people at the top, just like the PowerPoint where we saw that the people that can most afford it are paying the 1%. So
it's right on. Yeah.
Well, these are bad choices. We obviously wanted the state to give us a motor vehicle excise tax, or MVET, that would have been fair. We don't like proposing these. We do think that we're out of time and we're out of money, and the more important effect on the quality of life for all of us, rather than a modest increase in the sales tax and an increase in that car tab, would be to devastate transit service. So we're faced with bad choices. So we're going to urge people to hold their nose, vote for these sales taxes and this vehicle license fee, and we will pledge to continue the fight to get a more progressive tax source. We are being held hostage here in King County by the rest of the state. They know that they cannot pass a major tax measure in this state or elect anyone without Seattle's votes and King County's votes. So they want us to be part of a statewide transportation package. We want to be part of a statewide transportation package if it's a good package. But it needs to be balanced, and it needs to serve urban King County and Seattle.
Before we get to Katie, and we're all anticipating what you have to say. Chris, could you clarify something? Can this be implemented councilmanically, or would it have to go to voters?
The transit benefit, I believe it needs to go to the voters.
So maybe that's something that the next three of you can also touch on. Assuming that you think that this is a decent package, how do you actually convince voters to approve something like it? And the reason I ask is, you guys might remember, I think it was 2010, they were talking about revamping the juvenile detention facility. There was a regressive tax, it was a sales tax that was proposed, and voters rejected it. And so people aren't super into adding sales taxes. So if we go there, how do we do it?
Okay, I hope this isn't a letdown after all the buildup, but as basically everyone has said so far, we're in a really, really crappy situation. We're being given this choice between massive service cuts and increases in regressive taxes that are going to put more of a burden on working and poor people. We already have the most regressive tax system in the nation. So we are basically in a bind. It's the austerity bind that has been, sweeping the world since 2008, if not before. So as for what sort of position we should take on the county's Plan B, the sales tax and the vehicle license fee, since I'm up here representing the Transit Riders Union, I'm not going to tell you my personal opinion. All I'm going to say is that we have not made a decision yet. We have been debating this in our last two meetings, and we are probably going to be making a decision at our next meeting in February, which is actually our annual meeting. I encourage you, if you have an opinion about this, join us, come, be part of that debate, and shape what we do this year. So, this is a really crucial issue, and it bears thinking about. And we have not made our decision. Now, that being said, what we do know is we have to keep putting the pressure on the state legislature, because regardless of what happens with Plan B, even if it passes, that is not enough. That is not enough. That's enough to basically keep service sort of where it is. That's not enough to grow the system to where it needs to be. Hell, that's not enough to grow the system to the point where people don't need cars. I mean, what's the world gonna be like in 50 years if people are still driving at the rates they're driving today? We have a climate change crisis going on. We have to be serious about building mass public transit. So, we can't, whatever we think about what's going on now, we have to keep the pressure on the state. And I mean, yes, it's not looking likely that, in particular, the state Senate is going to be very amenable to passing something this session. However, we can't let them off the hook, because if we make enough noise, first of all, it's possible we can get something passed. And it's not, I mean, we don't want them to pass this big transportation package that's, unbalanced and everything like that. But what we're doing right now is, in the Transit Riders Union, we've been working with some friendly legislators in the House, including the 2 representatives of this district that we're in right now. So that's Brady Walkinshaw, who just is newly in, and Frank Chopp. Also with Jessen Farrell and Joe Fitzgibbon. And they are going to be introducing legislation even in the next few days, I mean very soon basically, at least one progressive local transit funding options bill. That will include the 1.5% MVET. And they're also, we don't have the specifics yet, but that's also going to include some other progressive funding options to sort of push the envelope and saying, look, local government should have these options. So things like a payroll tax, which New York City uses partly to fund their transit system, which is a tax on employers, and it is a percentage of gross payroll. It's progressive in that larger employers pay more. So things like that. So what our strategy is going to be to push that as far as possible. So, and we brought a couple things here today that we actually want you guys to help us out with. So I hope that everyone, or almost everyone at this point, has a sheet which is sort of an unfinished letter to state legislators. And if you fill this out with your name, your address, and there's some space if you want to write in like a particular message, if you don't know who your legislator is, just give this back to us. If we have your address, we can find out what district you're in, and we will photocopy this, send it to all of your legislators. And basically, we need to try to get these local options bills through the House. If we can do that, then all of the pressure is on the Senate. So in late February is Transportation Advocacy Day, when lots of people go down to Olympia to talk about transportation issues. We are planning to do a big demonstration on that day, and possibly, depending on where things are at, some kind of direct action, just really, really dramatize this. And so as individuals, and especially also as organizations, if people are here as representatives of organizations, we want to get as many people down there on that day, make sure that you're on our contact list so that we can work together to make that successful. And I mean, I don't know, realistically, I don't know what the chances are, but even if we can't actually pass this thing through the state legislature, just making enough noise about it, and making enough noise about the progressive funding issue, and just state versus local government funding authority issue, that's a step forward. So we're going to be really pushing that hard, and I hope that everyone here can do that with us. There's also this other yellow sheet that I hope everyone has, and there's one side that says take action, and that's got instructions for how to find your district online if you don't know who your representatives are, and call them. Call them, today, call them tomorrow, because when these bills get introduced, the more pressure there is, the more likely it is that we can get this through the House. And then we can really hammer on Rodney Tom and those other guys that were up on that board. And we might be planning something or other on the east side. We have lots of crazy ideas. We'll see what comes of it all. So yeah, basically sign up, join the Transit Riders Union, come to our next meeting, yeah, we'll just get this as far as we can get it to go.
Katie didn't let us down. No. Yasmin, you guys are also doing a rally, is that right? And you're organizing around MLK Day, is that correct?
Yeah, that's the details. Yeah, there is a march on Martin Luther King Day, which is next Monday, that we will be part of, and it's starting at 11 a.m. at the Garfield High School, and you should come out there. We need people to help us hold our banner, and we will be marching for transit justice. And the actual march still starts at 12:30.
Ty?
I just want to say that I think from the perspective of our employees in our union, we are really concerned about funding issues overall across our state. We look at tax giveaways to Boeing, such as the $9 billion tax break to keep them here, which is twice what we spend on the University of Washington, our premier university. Twice what we spend on it, we give away to Boeing just to keep them here. I think that we look at those issues as being sort of offensive, given that we haven't had a cost of living increase in 5 years. And I think that from our perspective as a union, we really need better sources of state funding, and we really need to look at where we're making tax breaks, and this transportation issue is a large part of that. We need to be able to fund the state services, such as transportation education, through those tax dollars before we even think about giving it away.
I'm going to cut you off, though, because I want to know, given our shitty options, which one you want to go with.
I think from the union perspective, we need the Band-Aid. We need Plan B just as a Band-Aid. Personally, though, I almost hope that we don't go for that and can't agree on it so that we can really get angry and really address some of these overall issues.
Thank you. I'm just going to throw out my 2 cents here. I think that getting a statewide, the legislature to approve a motor vehicle excise tax that we want is completely unrealistic because the legislature right now is useless. They can barely pass a budget. They can't get anything important done. I am prepared to hold my nose and vote for this package that was proposed by Dow Constantine, this Plan B, as it were. It will be the first time that I, as a man, have taken Plan B. But I think that it needs to come with a punishment for the legislature. I think that we need to if we are going to go with Plan B, if we're going to have our county council pass it, if we're going to send it to voters, if we are going to try to convince people that the shit sandwich is worth eating, then it needs to come with a pledge from our state legislators that they will reject a statewide transportation package. We, as a city of Seattle and as a county with all of our Democratic delegation that we send to Olympia, we should get them on the record and say that we will absolutely reject it, because the assumption is that they have us by the short hairs. The truth is we've got them. They can't do a lot of meaningful stuff in Olympia unless Seattle is on board, and I think that it's time, for once, for our feckless state lawmakers in Olympia who represent Seattle, who can't seem to agree on anything, to try to come together and make sure that the economic engine of the city of Seattle and King County is able to run well and not run on the backs of the poor people. I'm going to come down into the audience. Do people have questions?
Thank you so much. And by the way, I really love your articles about the King County Public Sheriffs. My name is Linda Averill, and I am a member of the Amalgamated Transit Union Local 587. I am a Metro bus driver. And I hope that in the future we'll be able to be included on panels about this question, because we do have a lot to say. I'm speaking today as a member of a caucus called Shop Floor 587. We are rank and file transit workers who are very critical about the way that Metro is being run. We definitely think that the state legislature needs to come in for some serious criticism, and I totally agree with the WFC rep. Thank you for mentioning the $8.7 billion in tax breaks for Boeing. Dow Constantine, I believe, is holding our county hostage. I think that he bears a lot of responsibility for the situation that Metro is in. He was right up there with the rest of the legislature while they were handing the money to Boeing. He's been out there championing stadiums, and yet here he is, talking about the, to me, untenable situation of gutting our transit system. Okay, so I guess I'd like the panel to respond. What do you guys think about a Plan C, which is what we're trying to put forward? Ideas such as chopping Metro from the top. We have a lot of very well-paid, high-paid management. We think we're a little top-heavy. What do you think about a developer's fee? Right now it goes to affordable housing, but the city council has talked about putting a higher rate on it, and I think that it probably could, some of it, be directed to public transit infrastructure. What do you think about the idea of mothballing extensions of the streetcar? We just spent $3 million on a study for it to Ballard. What do you think about the idea of the Sound Transit head tax, which does allow Sound Transit to levy a tax on employers based on how many employees they have? It seems like that money could very easily be put into public transit. And what do you think about the false division between operations and capital? Thank you.
You have 47 questions to answer and 30 seconds to do it. I want to start with Chris because, I mean, like, you know, some of the ideas, I mean, you work with Metro. What do you think about cutting costs, your own job at Metro, in order to save money? There's also a development fee. There was also the head tax from Sound Transit. There was mothballing the streetcar. I know also some people have suggested as a Plan C that the city of Seattle simply buy back its own service from King County. I don't expect you guys to answer all of these, but maybe you can just address a few of those real quick.
I'm not going to try to answer everything Linda said. I do think that we have looked for efficiencies throughout Metro. We're committed to continuing to look at efficiencies throughout Metro. We have cut a lot of support staff in the past years, and you know, we'll continue to look for efficiencies at Metro. I also believe that, you know, part of Linda's anger is people's anger in the society about how, you know, one of the first things conservatives say is that our bus drivers get paid too much. And that is simply not true. You know, driving a bus is one of the toughest jobs I know of in this region. You know, you gotta be a security guard, a babysitter, a direction finder, and you've got to drive $500,000 to $1 million in rolling stock that you're responsible for every day while you're letting people in and off, on and off the bus. You know, and so you do think we have to have conversations about what our priorities are in this region.
Are any of those options appealing?
Which ones? I think we need to continue to look at the structure of Metro and continue to make sure it's as efficient as possible. Linda and I may disagree on some of the specifics, but I think we all agree we need to examine our priorities in this region. As for the head tax for Sound Transit, I'm not sure about Sound Transit's actual funding authority right now. We are way behind on building light rail in this region too. In 1968 and 1970, we voted in this region, well, we didn't because none of us were here, but voted down light rail, and now we're scrambling to build that now when it's much more expensive. So,
anyone else on the panel, any of these ideas you heard that you think you could get behind?
I like Plan C. I think we should look into a lot of it.
Plan C was very complicated. Was there any particular?
It's very complicated. I think that there's always room for efficiencies in any organization, and I think that oftentimes the highest paid admin positions go without question for salary modifications when the drivers and the other people are working on the streets and on the front line have to deal with the cost overruns. I think that should just be addressed and looked at, and I hope to work with organizations to do that. Head tax on light rail and link, sure, let's look at. I think there's lots of options, and I think lots of C sounds like we should look into them and see what we can do.
Katie?
I think this is different from the Sound Transit head tax, but I believe the county has the power to levy a head tax on employers. It's like $2 per employee per month or something like that that can go to transit stuff. And I mean, I think that is something they should look into. I believe the estimate that I got for what that might raise countywide was around 20 million a year. So I mean, that's not enough. And I think most of the things that Linda mentioned, you know, are maybe worth looking into, but I don't think that any one of them is going to actually raise that much money. I mean, one thing that the Transit Riders Union has recommended that the county look into the employer head tax for is to really fund a robust low-income fare program. This is something we've been campaigning for since we started, basically, and we're extremely pleased that the county is moving forward with a low-income fare program, or seems like they're moving forward with a low-income fare program. The level that they've suggested for the low-income fare, $1.50, is higher than we would like. We were asking for no higher than $1, so I think looking into the employer head tax and other new revenue options to bring that fare down is something that we would definitely recommend.
I would point out that employer head tax that has been mentioned is not actually in the transit, the TBD legislation that we're talking about. It's in the RTID legislation, or Regional Transportation Investment District legislation. Okay. And it can only be used on capital, not operating.
Bo, real quick, then I want to get to more questions, otherwise people are going to kill me out here.
Development impact fees, there are strict limitations at the state level about where they can go, and again, it's almost always capital. They can't go to operating budgets. So.
My question is, what are you going to do to organize the riders so that we can counterbalance the right-wingers who listen to Cairo and Como, and they think they understand the world? Well, we need to be in their world. So what are you going to do about that?
Okay, I guess I'll answer that. First of all, hell yeah, we got to organize as transit riders. And that's what we're trying to do, but it's hard. And it's hard for a number of reasons. One of those reasons is that we are an all-volunteer organization. We're independent, so we don't get big bucks from some foundation or from politicians or whatever. We are funded by our membership dues, and we are poor. So we're doing the best we can, and our power is in numbers. So we need people to join us. We have, I mean, what you say about countering, right-wing propaganda, absolutely. We have our transit reader newsletter. We've got a bunch of our second issue out there on our table, and we want to increase distribution of that as much as possible. So, whether you're a member or not, if you want to give that out to people on your bus in your neighborhood, we can arrange that. We can give you a stack of newsletters whenever we put one out. But I mean, it's just at the beginning, at least, it's hard, slow work, and we have to get to the point in terms of size where just all the internal machinery of a successful organization, and I think alliances, that's the other real important thing. So, transit is not an isolated issue. There's all sorts of things going on in this city right now, and we need to not just organize ourselves as transit riders, but we need to be working with other organizations to build this bigger movement that's going to bring more people in. I don't know if that answers your question, but anyone else want to add anything?
I want to actually put a finer point on that question, because you're supporting a bill that is yet to be introduced by 4 Seattle area lawmakers with an MVET. You're holding out hope for it. You're not going to support this Plan B option.
Wait, no. We haven't made a decision yet on Plan B. We are going to make a decision. We could decide to support it.
Totally.
The point is
I'm not saying that you're going to oppose
okay.
it, but you want to get this bill through the legislature. You want to put pressure on the Senate. What specifically can transit riders do, as this man is asking, to leverage that pressure to advance this bill?
So I mean, the first thing is contact your legislators now. Write your name and address on this thing, give it back to us, call your legislators, tell them to get this bill through the House. Tell them that the transit funding options bills need to get through this session. Now that's boring. I mean, contacting your legislators is boring, and it feels really fruitless, but this is a case in which it's really important. And
let me cut you off. Let me just ask everybody here. I know this crazy thing, but who here would be willing to contact their 3 legislators? There's 2 state representatives and their state senator, even to a short email or fill out this form here today and say, we want to see a motor vehicle excise bill passed in the legislature this year. What is that, 20 people, 30 people?
40.
40 people. 40 people right now are taking the pledge. Thank you.
My name is Wade Harness. I'm also a Metro driver, and for a long time, And a little levity first. I would like to request that Metro change its name. The reason I'm asking that is I believe it would be a solution. The name I'm requesting that it change it to is Boyne. The reason I'm saying that is because Boyne has pulled off one hell of a trick. They've not only managed to prove that they're hand over fist making profits in the black, they've gone to the legislature and demanded that it meet immediately for $9 billion tax break. And then they've gone to all their employees and said, we need concessions from you. So the fact is, I'm asking you to consider going around the legislature and doing what you're doing right now on the panel, which is think about alternatives like coordinating the schools, the businesses, the hospitals, organizing everyone together and going around and thinking about alternatives, not just in terms of funding, but what can we do as a community to provide our own transportation, i.e. the hospitals need the people to get to the hospitals, same with the schools, and so it's time to think for everyone to pull in together. What's your question for the panel? My question is, are you willing to outreach to each other to do that?
Yes.
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 I think that maybe a certain Mr. Dennis Saxman might have a question. You get one.
That's all right. I won't make a speech, so I'll get three. My first question is, what is Dominique Holden, Seattle Central, and Alex Brennan, representing Sustainable Seattle Capitol Hill Housing, going to do to impose development fees on developers whose development you have all been cheerleading for on Capitol Hill? They're all avid supporters, the people who helped organize this event, avid supporters of untaxed unbridled development at Capitol Hill. Number two is, I have one of those reduced regional fare passes. I'm concerned with how this $1.50 a ride's going to affect me, because I currently pay $27 a month flat fee for unlimited rides, and that's triple from what it was before. And one last question for Alex Brennan. Alex, when you were at the Height meeting on the 14th, they're attended by 250 to 300 homeowners and renters on Capitol Hill. He remarked on how white everybody was there. So I wonder if you're going to remark this time on how white this panel is?
Let me take
Yeah, how white is everybody on the panel?
Pretty damn
the first
white.
question was about taxing developers. Dennis has been really concerned about that. Since you work with Capitol Hill Housing, do you want to address that?
Yeah. Yeah, I actually, as Dennis actually knows, we're pretty involved in promoting community benefits and incentive zoning for new development projects on Capitol Hill and throughout the city. We were very involved in securing funding for 86 new affordable housing units as part of Sound Transit's sale of surplus property at the Capitol Hill Light Rail Station. And the membership organization that we're part of, Housing Development Consortium, has been one of the primary advocates for incentive zoning in South Lake Union and downtown, and it's certainly something that we're really interested in as a way to provide affordable housing. I hadn't heard of, I think someone earlier mentioned that as a potential source for transit revenue, and I hadn't heard that that was a potential option, so I don't know a ton about that. That's the first question, right?
Yeah, does anybody want to address anything else?
Let me address the second question.
Oh, white man would like to address the second question.
Yes. The second question was about the regional reduced fare permit program. The low-income fare is in addition to the current programs we have. Metro already passes out $1.8 million. I think next year it's going to be $2.3 million in free fare tickets that are passed out through social service agencies. Those will continue. The regional reduced fare permit that you have to get a special certification for will also continue at that same price. So, not the regional reduced fare program. That stays the same. The low-income fare is in addition to those two programs.
Let's take another question.
Mine is going to be short. I just wanted to ask if we could really get back to talking about the immediate problem. I totally respect and understand all these issues. I'm with you guys on the taxing structure, but I'm here because I want to save my bus, and I want to know how we can do it now by June before the cuts start.
I mean, it sounds like you're supporting this Plan B that would make it happen with an April vote. So if you're going to hold your nose and you want Plan B to get through the county council, you want it to pass at the ballot, what's your advice to make it happen?
I mean, there's going to be, so whatever the Transit Riders Union decides to do, there's going to be a campaign to pass that ballot measure. And I'm sure there's going to be phone banking, flyers, whatever. There's going to be things that people can do to try to get that to pass. I don't think that anyone has the specifics of that yet. Or if, am I wrong, Carla?
No, I have.
Okay. Okay, well, if you want to know, then talk to Carla.
I think, though, that we still need to be concerned about the larger issues and the future after this. I think that we need to look at Plan B as an option, and we need to call it a Band-Aid. We need to say that we're holding our nose to it because we're sort of being held hostage. But we need to put that out there in a way that also makes us angry that we don't have a long-term fix and solution. Because that's a chronic problem right now where we aren't looking at these long-term options. And that needs to be discussed. And we really need to get the community's anger on it, to push that for long-term solutions.
Here you go.
Thank you very much. My name is Jane Couchman. I represent elderly people in the, is this thing on? Lower Queen Anne area, also known as Uptown. I can tell you my personal anecdotes and my war stories about Metro or about many other issues that would bring you to your knees weeping or bring you to your feet cheering. But who cares? I've been here since noon thinking that I was going to hear ideas thrown out because you've got a seed organization. Do you know, here's a question, that you can take this Transit Riders organization and use it to organize everybody in this city and in this county to try to get the legislature to do what we want? There's only one way you can do it. You ask Patty Murray and our other national legislators to bring their muscle for our benefit. They've got contacts. We elected them, and if they want to stay where they are, they will see to it that Seattle gets the state legislature's foot off their neck. Do you know, gentlemen from the Metro District, and thank you so much for your input today, that the bus riders, that the bus drivers our lives are in their hands. I deplore any concession that a bus driver has had to make because we want them to be happy, well-fed, and in a good mood every week. Life is saved. And finally, where funding is concerned, do you know that in Lower Queen Anne, the South Korean consulate and the CVS pharmacy are taking out 7 viable, useful, productive, revenue-producing businesses? Now, there's a place where people should have to pay to do that. The funding options are just limitless once we get out from under the state legislator's yoke. Thank you all for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Dominic, before you
want to respond? Go ahead.
I did want to, people are asking what they can do, and I did want to direct them. There is a website, in addition to supporting the efforts of the Transit Riders Union, there is a website and a organization has been formed to campaign for this. It's called Move King County Now, and their website is movekingcountynow.org. If you go there, you'll find information about the campaign. There's opportunities to sign up to help and to talk to people throughout the county about both solving this short-term problem, the Band-Aid as he refers to it, and fighting for real change in the future.
My name is Terrell Forrest Paramore. I work here at this school, and go Seahawks, by the way. But I have a question. It seems like we're always putting a Band-Aid on something, and it doesn't affect the legislators, or it affects my pockets. The city, we now have to pay for grocery bags on top of other things. They raised the parking on top of that. I just want to know, when is it going to not affect my pocket? Because it seems like the fare's going to go up and the bus routes is going to be shortened. And then what am I going to do? Do I have to walk a half a mile or 2 miles to get to work? And I thought the metro system prides itself on being the best, one of the best transportations in the nation. And I don't want us to decline because of things. So I would want to know, like, is there any other options other than us just forking out more money?
Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to affect your pocket after we build a movement of working and poor people and start taxing corporations and the rich that aren't paying their fair share and haven't been for 4 decades. And that's not going to happen overnight, but everyone in this room needs to be part of that.
I really hate to sound like a broken record, but I completely agree. We need to look at long-term funding issues and how to put the responsibility for taxes back to the people that deserve to pay them. The people at the top pay the least in taxes, but they benefit the most from those state services because they benefit from their employees coming into work every day. They benefit from the schools providing education to their potential employees. We've got to look at things like progressive, income taxation in Washington State. We've got to look at the motor vehicle excise tax. We've got to look at raising the capital gains tax nationwide. We've got to look at how to share that tax burden more fairly throughout our society.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to squeeze in one last question. I'm sorry, sir, I saw that your hand was up, but we do need to wrap up. This gentleman here had his hand up.
Thank you. My name is Terrell Kelly. I'm also an employee here at Seattle Central. So we obviously all care about the issue here. But what about the people that aren't here? The elected officials or representatives or people that don't know about what's going on. How do you propose that we capture media attention to put pressure on the legislator? And how do you propose that we have representatives of the legislator or elected officials sit down and hear what we have to say and what's concerning us? And how do you get the information out to people in areas such as Rainier Beach, Skyway, and are there meetings being held there?
Those are great questions. So how do you get the media to exert pressure? How do you get them to sit down? And how do you get the word out to a lot of South and Southeast Seattle communities?
Well, as usual in this town, people like Dominic help drive the debate, because the, mainstream media is often afraid to talk about the real issues. So, encouraging the stranger and other progressive media sources to help drive that debate is a great idea. That website I mentioned does have a lot of information about rallies. King County can't lobby for this, but we can provide information. We've had a van going around all over the county, including Skyway and a lot of places others, on information about the situation we're in and what we're proposing. And we're going to continue to do everything we can, but I would encourage all of you to do everything you can. Letters to the editor, everything you can do to make this, visible?
Yeah, I mean, I think, in terms of getting the word out to Transit Riders Union, we go out to bus stops and we talk to people. We talk to people on buses. We just need to keep doing more of that. For the media, I mean, I think, holding demonstrations, events and then getting the media to cover them is one way. So we're going to be doing that in the next couple months as we figure out what's going on in the legislature, especially if we're trying to target Rodney Tom and those East Side legislators. We've thought we could go, maybe we can do something in Medina where he lives, something that, the media wants to cover. So, I mean, I think we'll be planning events like that, and I hope everyone can get on our contact list so that you can hear about them. Yeah. Yeah, people in Medina don't need to ride the bus, right? They all got expensive cars. So let's march over there and show them what people who ride the bus look like.
Anyone else want to offer their thoughts on this?
Well, one thing I'll just say is that I was really impressed that Seattle Central put a lot of resources into putting this together, and I think it would be really great to have other community colleges around the region do similar things. And I don't know if the college here is having conversations with some of their sister colleges, but I hope so, and I would really... Sorry?
Bellevue College.
Bellevue College is doing something similar?
No, but they should.
Yeah, they should. That would... I think that's, it's one small way to get the conversation happening in other places.
Well, real quick, last week I met with representatives of South Seattle, and they're in the very early stages of planning a similar forum in the coming months.
I want to thank all of you guys who came out for this. For those of you who are contacting your lawmakers, I'm sorry, I know that there are a few people in the audience who wanted to ask questions, but we're out of time. But thank you guys very much, and I know the panelists will be here for a bit if you want to follow up with any of them. I was handed this piece of paper that says there's a public rally to fund public transit now, and it's Wednesday, January 29th at 4 p.m. in Westlake Park at 4th and Pine. So it'd be, you guys have Facebook, you're on Twitter, share with your friends that this rally is happening, and hopefully we can get a few of the folks who live in communities who are affected by this, who sometimes don't hear about what's happening with our transit or don't know how to get involved at that event. I'm sure you guys are going to be there in force. I imagine Metro is going to be there as well. And finally, thanks to all of our panelists. Thank you guys.
Thank you.